Well, we're going to let them double dip the chip because we love our friends at Pelican Brewing.
Yeah, we
Brought
do.
to you by Pelican Brewing, now offering their signature Pelican West Coast IPA on a shelf near you. Raise your glass, drink on. Pelican Brewing, born at the beach. For one last time this college football season, although, as he will tell you, there is no off season, and that's why I spent 20 minutes this weekend watching Decory and more highlights. I admit that I have a problem. Josh Pate is the commissioner of college football at Josh Pate CFB on Twitter. His show every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock our time, live on YouTube. Catch the podcast wherever you find your podcast. And if you, like me, are also a sicko, he is there for you all, no off season long, and he will be there for you all the way up leading into week 0. Pate, good morning to you. What's the reaction to the breakdown? Monday night, there was a whole debate. Is there any buzz? Why isn't there more buzz about this national championship game? We need to fix the calendar. Why isn't it on New Year's Day? You were there. What was the vibe like? The emotions in seeing Ryan Day, who can't win a big game a month ago and was probably going to get fired, then go on to win a national title.
Such a wordsmith when you bring these segments in. It's amazing. It's like you're pressing record and canning this, but I know it's live.
Yeah.
I know you. Ethically, you would never do such a thing.
Never.
So the vibe is an interesting question, okay, because I was in that bubble the whole year. If you're at the game, you're in a bubble, so you don't really get a sense of what, a mailman in Topeka, Kansas is feeling in regards to the hype around something. I did hear a lot of that feedback. I heard a lot of the feedback of, wow, there doesn't seem to be as much buzz considering that this is Ohio State Notre Dame on a championship day as would normally be. And maybe that's true because I heard it from a lot of people. So a couple of things are obvious. January 20th is way too late to be playing a national title game. Monday is always the wrong day to be playing a national title game.
Yeah.
Both of those things I think we would get broad consensus agreement on, and then you would just get into nonsense fighting and slapping each other, trying to figure out the solution to it. And at that point, you would understand why it's hard to run college football because no one's actually running college football. So the vibe around it was amazing. Tickets going for $2,000 a piece equals a bunch of people in a sold-out building really being invested in the game. And you got two big brands, and, the colors look good together. So all of that was wonderful. Seeing Ryan Day, as you said, finally doing something I was told he can't do. That's always fun because then the people who said he can't are the same ones celebrating him. I couldn't help but think about this while I was there. We were doing post-game stuff for CBS down on the field, and I remembered last year we were in Houston. Last year, Michigan won the title, and last year I remember looking up in the crowd, and everybody's ecstatic, and everyone's cheering and hugging each other and crying, and I thought to myself, good for you people, but shame on you people. And it was the most, snooty thought I had ever had about a fan base, but it was only because I remember 3 years prior, many of them wanted Harbaugh fired. And they just kind of whitewashed history, and they want you to forget about that. Well, we don't need to go back 3 years. We don't need to go back 3 months. We go back 51 days, I think it was, after the Michigan loss for Ohio State. There's a chunk of his fan base that wanted him gone. And they're some of the same people paid $2,000+ per ticket to have access to a building in which he ended up winning a national title, and they cheer their heads off. And it's just funny. Fans don't run athletic departments. You're free to feel however you want to, think whatever you want, post whatever you want, call in and say whatever you want. But it's so funny in an alternate universe, if we just let popular fan vote run a program, how quickly the program would get run into the ground.
It absolutely would. And to your point on Harbaugh, it wasn't just the fans. The athletic administration said take a pay cut and then come back and win, or you're out of here. So even the universities at times can get out of hand with this stuff. I am curious, 12-team playoff year one, a lot of bitching and moaning. You've made some good points. We've talked about just the seeding and what's it all going to be. I want to ask you, the NFL playoffs are also happening, and on average, the NFL playoffs give us 6 new teams every year from both conferences combined. I'm curious, how do you think that is going to be in college football? We had some surprise teams certainly this year, but we also have our established dominant programs. How many programs do you think will be new in the 12-team next year? I don't know what the seeding's going to be, but how many new teams do you think we're going to have next year?
I think on average you could expect 2 or 3, like an average of maybe 2.5 or 3.5 or something like that. You expand the field, you're always going to up your statistical probability of getting first-year teams in. But as far as the ones who are going to be there at the end, I really hate to be the bearer of bad news. And you can, of course, always root for me to be wrong. It's going to be the same teams there at the end. It's going to be the same ones it's always been because this is not pro sports. And you cannot You cannot engineer your way to your utopian endpoint. That's a really fancy sentence. I don't need to be making sentences like that.
Talk about a canned answer.
That was great, man.
It
That
is
was
amazing,
impressive.
man. Okay, so here, take the talk boy. We don't need the recorded version of me anymore. I just think there's a group of people. That doesn't make you wrong or anything, but there's a group of people who are very idealistic about how they want college football to look. And it always mirrors what other sports give us. And college football is one of one. It is not like any other sport. The resources are not equal. It is not an equitable starting point. Some programs have been around for 150 years. Some have been around for 50 years. Some of them have mega donors. Some of them have no donors. It's just some of them have stadiums that seat 100,000. Some of them seat 30,000. It's a different landscape. And so you try and change this and tweak that. And at the end of the day, the same ones with deeper pockets and better resources are going to end up working the system to their advantage. Even if they don't do it immediately, they will do it eventually. And at the end, here's the worst part. At the end, I know there are some who wanted to see the expanded playoff because they knew, or they thought they knew, it would up the chances that they get a Cinderella story. But you just saw the closest you'll ever get to a Cinderella story, because a Boise is never making a run in this format. Cincinnati, TCU, they're never making a run in this format. In reality, unbeknownst to many, they were as close as they'll ever get in the old format, which I was told was satanic in its construction. The new format is just going to take a Goliath posing as a Cinderella, like Ohio State, who trips up twice and would have been out in previous iterations, and it gives them a third shot. And they get right, and they do what ultra-talented teams do, and they win when it comes time to win. And Ohio State makes a run as an 8 seed, and that's as close as you're really going to get to a Cinderella. You would have boxed them out with the old format. Now you just let them make a run. And I do want to give you guys one fair piece of advice or word of caution. I don't think nearly as many people are upset about this as will end up being upset about this, because it was Ohio State that made the run. But there will come a time very soon where it's an SEC team that benefits off of this format, and it's like an Alabama that gets a third shot and makes a run, or a Georgia, or an LSU. And at that point, I think a lot of the people that are okay with it right now, a lot of the people that are saying, oh, it's okay, the best team won, that's what we wanted, will be very upset when they find out it's an SEC team that gets a third shot to make a run, and previous versions would have eliminated that team. So let's just maintain this energy now. Let's maintain this, we love it, let's slap each other on the back energy when you get like Georgia at the finish line that was given a third shot after losing to Georgia Tech and like Tennessee in the regular season, because that will happen eventually.
I would love to ask you more. We have more questions for you. I have to interrupt, though, and your deep-cut poll of mentioning a talk boy, not a cooler, more overrated toy in my lifetime than the talk boy from Home Alone.
It was just a tape recorder.
I know, but it looked so cool, didn't it?
It was. And look, the genius behind it was they put the extendable microphone arm on it.
Yes.
Which clearly served no functional purpose,
None
because
at
you
all.
would have talked into it just as much if it didn't extend. And I understand that we are completely crushing our 18 to 34-year-old demographic here. They will never turn the show back on, but it did need to be said.
People don't
It needed to
understand,
be.
man. That was a time in history, man.
They don't get it, man. They don't get it. He's the commissioner of the sport, Josh Pate, CFB on Twitter. His show, Josh Pate's College Football Show, every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock, live on YouTube. Catch the podcast wherever you find your podcast. There is no off-season in Josh Pate's country, and that's why we are believers in him. I had like a Leo DiCaprio meme GIF moment from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's like snapping his fingers and pointing at the TV. I was scrolling on Twitter the other day, and I saw a story about the commissioner of the ACC saying, hey, you know what, we might just kind of scrap conference championship games. Maybe we'll go 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, or maybe our top 2 teams will get into the playoff automatically, and then 3 will play 5 or whatever. 3 will play 6 and 4 will play 5. And I had that snap and point moment where I thought, that's what Josh Pate told us about 6 weeks ago is going to happen. How many wholesale changes are we thinking in the short term? And where do you stand and reside on those? Because it did feel like some tweaking was necessary towards the end of the season.
If I didn't know any better, I would almost think that when I speak about topics like that, I'm not just blindly running my mouth. It could actually be informed. It's a theory that I want to float out there. Yeah. All right. So now that I blindfolded myself and I happen to hit the dartboard on this, let me take it a step further and let me tell you the ACC is not the only conference working on this. The SEC is working on it. The Big Ten is working on it. Now, if you're tuning in late, here's basically what we're talking about. These conferences just watched this format play out, and it's not going to work long term for many reasons. But mostly it's not going to work because the SEC feels like it got screwed, whether you agree or not. They feel like that. The Big Ten knows they could get screwed in the future. And lastly, it took the focus off the conference races, and they cannot lose the value of those conference races and conference title games. So the format we are going to end up with, I will guarantee you this, the format we will end up with is not let's just go 1 through 12 and seed it like that, or 1 through 14 and seed it like that. The fan may want that. The commissioner doesn't want that. The commissioner of the SEC or the Big Ten, who drive the boat right now, what they want is, if we're going to 14 or whatever, get to that number. Let's guarantee a certain amount of seats. So 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 3 for whoever. And what they want to do is have that set. And then they want to bake all the value and focus into their conference title races. Like, there is no more question of how many teams will the SEC get in. You know they're going to get 4 in. And at that point, I think what they're going towards is a model where the team that finishes number 1 in their conference standings, and maybe even top 2 in their conference standings, depending on structure, they don't even have to play in a conference title game. Their reward is number 1 is named the SEC champ, and he gets 1 seat at the table. The number 2 team, the runner-up team, also gets the number 2 seat at the table. And then there are 2 SEC spots left. Big Ten's doing the same thing. And then you have a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5. You have 2 play-in games on what would have been Conference Championship Saturday. So the TV partner's happy because you gave them double the inventory. You're still solely focused on the SEC conference race. You've got half a dozen teams that end up being involved in sort of the SEC's branch of the playoff. The same thing's happening at the same time in the Big Ten. That's where I think we're headed. Jim Phillips knows that. Jim Phillips knows the ACC will not have the gravitas to get as many guaranteed spots, but they're still angling for however many spots they're going to get, how to structure their season that puts a maximum focus on their conference instead of just the holistic playoff race.
Yeah. Oregon is the Wolf ranking national champion, so hang the banner in Eugene for a lot of Duck fans because the season did not end the way they wanted to. And it's not that Dan Lanning won't or can't, to our point about Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. This year's team was pretty loaded. The quarterback spot was as good as it's ever been statistically. They were amazing. I'm curious your read on Oregon going into next year and just kind of, I guess, explaining to people, Oregon's been talked about for a while, but like finally breaking through and winning those games, the Ohio State games, the Georgia game, games like that, and finally breaking through what it takes.
Yeah, it takes continuing to put yourself in the position. Because I got news for you now. Dan Lanning is the new Ryan Day. Ryan Day was the new Kirby, and then Dan Lanning is going to be the new Ryan Day. And what I mean by that is the public has to have some coach out there that's given a lot of credit that hasn't won the big game yet. And they're going to say the same thing. They said Kirby couldn't win the big one. And then he beat Saban he beat Saban and he won the title a couple of times, and no one said it. So then they started to say it about Ryan Day. He just won a title. They can't say it about him anymore. They never learn the lesson. They just shift the focus somewhere. So now it'll be Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning may win the national title next year. He may win it 5 years from now. He'll eventually win one. He will be the same coach then that he is right now. Ryan Day is the same coach today as he was 48 hours ago. Nothing changed. His Wikipedia page changed. His resume changed. He didn't change. Lanning's good enough now, just like Kirby was, just like Ryan Day was. Here's what you have to do. You have to have the skill to put your team in position to take a shot at the title as many times as possible, and eventually it works out, maybe once, maybe 3 times, but it'll eventually work out. That is what he has to do. You have to keep upgrading your coaching staff. You have to continue to till the soil to make sure there's no complacency or mundaneness that sets in, and I think Lanning's really good at doing that. So they'll get there, but in the meantime, Oregon fans are about to have to deal with this insufferable conversation, but it's a privilege to be involved in it. But it's an insufferable conversation. It will happen even within your own ranks. It will happen from outside your ranks. So I'm just here to get you ready for it.
Yeah, we're bracing for all that impact. Josh Pate, he's the commissioner of the sport, at Josh Pate CFB on Twitter. Go give him a follow. His show every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock live on YouTube. Catch a podcast wherever you find your podcast. Man, from the bottom of our hearts, genuinely thank you for all these hits this year. We've had people say, oh, he's only coming on saying positive things about Oregon because they're paying him. And we're like, well, we were trying to give him stuff, and the guy won't take anything.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah,
hold on,
these accusations are thrown out there, Pate.
Wait. Oh, I hope they're true. I just want to know which account the money went to.
It's on its way. Don't worry. The check will clear eventually. You're the best in the business, man. I love college football. Can't wait to watch all non-off season, and hopefully we can catch up again soon, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
There you go. Josh Pate of the Josh Pate College Football Show.
Dan Lanning's the new Ryan Day.
He's the new Ryan Day.
He's right, though. The public needs a coach that hasn't done it until they do it. And
you just move on. You just move to the next one.
Yeah.
Who's the next one? All right, let's find the next one and move on.
Look, your coach is the new Lamar.
We got a Lamar Jackson, man.
And Pate saying he's going to do it. Lamar's teammate saying he's going to do it.
He's going to do it, damn it.
The other half of sports fans are saying, no, they won't.
No, he'll never do it. He can't win the big one. The Daily Ticker brought to you by Pelican Brewing, now offering their signature Pelican West Coast IPA. On a shelf near you, raise your glass, drink on. Pelican Brewing, born at the beach.